Well, thank you all so much for coming. It's fantastic to see such a crowded room. Let's start at the beginning. Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster. None of us are going to disagree with that, I hope. We know that our small businesses have been wrapped up in red tape. We know that our farmers have been sold down the river. We know that our NHS and care services have lost a lot of their staff, including hospitality. You will know that I am the MP for St Albans. St Albans voted 63% Remain. We had a fairly large population from various different European countries, and St Albans for Europe was the largest European movement grassroots group. So large, in fact, that they actually went round setting up all the other groups around Hertfordshire and in many other places beyond. And we're incredibly proud of that fact. So we're not only did my constituency vote Remain, but we're an activist base for that Remain movement. We went on, I think, every single march in London. I went on one of them in a wheelchair because I'd had a foot operation. My poor husband had blisters on his hand the next day. We went all out like everybody else did to try and stop Brexit. But we didn't. And it was devastating. And I won in 2019, one of the very few people that did. It was a huge honour. It was very exciting for me and my team. And I was smiling from ear to ear when the result was announced. And I got off stage, and the first question that was put to me was, and how do you feel about the fact that Jo Swinson has lost her seat? And I didn't know. And I was live on air at about 5 a.m. And that's the moment where you have to put your big girl pants on. You're exhausted after a 6-week campaign, and you feel sick to your stomach, and you put your candidate face on and say, this is a big loss for British politics, but I'm sure we're going to do really well as the night goes on. But we didn't, did we? And it was a really tough night, because actually within the space of 3 days, I had 3,000 emails to deal with. When you get elected, it's a real shock. I went to the count that night, and as I was in the taxi arriving at the sports hall where they do the count, I had 6 unread emails across all of my inboxes. In the morning, after we'd had the count, had my breakfast, I had 200, and by Monday morning, 3,000. And you suddenly realise how many people are in a state of crisis. And it took probably about 3 months until I actually had the bandwidth to process how I felt about that emotion, and the bandwidth to work out how I felt about the fact that we'd left the EU. And when I had the time to do that, it was the night I was asked to go and speak to St Albans for Europe on the night of their very last meeting before they disbanded, and they wanted to know what I thought. And what I said to them was, you guys have been amazing. You've been an activist base, not just here in St Albans, but across the whole of Hertfordshire. But Brexit was always going to be the start of a lot of other awful things that the Conservative Party wanted to do. Brexit was never the end destination. It was the start to bring in a whole new way of doing politics, to do all sorts of things, to cut our environmental regulations, our standards, all those kind of things. And it's going to be a long way back. I said, but consider yourselves a sleeping giant. One day, we may need you again. But in the meantime, have a rest. Meanwhile, in Parliament, as a parliamentary party, we've been thinking about what can we do? What do we do in this new environment in which we find ourselves? And so we convened a group of experts, European experts, professors and people who worked in European academia and had worked in Europe, and business people, and they came up with our roadmap, our 4-stage plan, which we often talk about. It wasn't a leadership initiative, it was all these experts that we pulled together and said, what do we do? And they convened this 4-stage plan. And as far as I'm concerned, all of us here, all of us in the party should agree that Brexit is a terrible thing, and it's only had a lot of damage. All of us, I hope, can say that we're internationalist, and that internationalism is in our veins as Liberals. All of us should be able to agree that we have a roadmap, and we should be really proud of the fact we are the only UK-wide party, probably the only political party that has set out a roadmap as how we can be back in the heart of Europe again. But there's a question of emphasis, and I think there's a question of language. On language, I think we have to be incredibly careful not to slip back into using the language of the past. Being Remainers and Brexiters was so divisive. I don't know about you, but it made life very difficult in my family. It still does at Christmas. Anyway, enough about that. We have got to take the country with us. We have got to take the country with us. The fact, and I think we have, not just have we set out this roadmap, we have a moral responsibility as internationalists to take the public with us and show them how we can rebuild that relationship and how we can build that trust. So I think we should be proud of the fact that we have a roadmap, and we can talk about the fact we have that roadmap, but the language matters. We can't go back to the division of the past. We have got to talk about the future and what those future stages are. But there is also a question of emphasis. And I don't know about you, I don't know how many of you are councillors or how many of you knock on doors, but I can tell you that our country is in a state of complete and utter crisis. Hopefully you will all recognise that. I get desperate emails on a daily basis from people who can't afford their mortgages, they can't afford their rent, they can't afford their bills, they can't afford their food, they can't see a GP, they can't get a mental health nurse, they can't get their SEND assessment. On a daily basis, people's eyes are so stuck in the daily grind of how difficult life is under this Conservative government. They just can't lift their eyes. They haven't got the bandwidth to think about those big issues to do with UK and EU relations. There hopefully will come a time when they will. But in the meantime, I think that for us to be relevant as a political party, we have got to talk about the NHS, we have got to talk about the cost of living, we have got to give people the answers to the things that they are finding crippling in their daily lives. But the fact that we focus on that as an emphasis does not mean that it diminishes our passion one iota. It just means that we have to focus on those things for now. So those are my opening remarks. Thank you very, very much. I'm sorry that I'll have to run away in 10, 12 minutes or so, but thank you all for coming. It's a real honour and pleasure to talk to you all. Thank you.